It was a quiet evening in the city. The streets were calm, with only a few cars driving by as the sun set behind the tall buildings. Mayor Jennifer Harris had just finished a long day at the office, attending meetings and dealing with the usual political challenges. She was looking forward to a peaceful evening at home, away from the stress of the day. As she drove through the familiar streets, her mind drifted, thinking about the upcoming events for the city and her plans for the future. Jennifer had been serving as mayor for a few years now and had worked hard to gain the respect and trust of the community. She had always been committed to making the city a better place, fighting for justice and equality, and standing up for the rights of everyone, no matter their background. She knew that leadership came with its challenges, but she was proud of the progress the city had made under her guidance. As Jennifer turned onto a side street near her home, she noticed flashing lights in her rearview mirror. At first, she thought it might be an emergency vehicle rushing to a call, but then the sound of a siren followed. Her heart skipped a beat. She pulled over to the side of the road, unsure of what was happening. A few moments later, Officer Brad Thompson, a white police officer known for his strict approach to law enforcement, walked up to her car. Jennifer rolled down the window, preparing to greet him with a polite smile, expecting it to be a minor issue, maybe a simple traffic violation like speeding or a broken taillight. "Good evening, ma'am. I pulled you over for a traffic violation. Can I see your driver's license and registration, please?" Officer Thompson's voice was firm, and he stood tall, his hand resting on his belt, ready for the next steps. He seemed like he was in no mood for any back and forth, treating this encounter like just another routine traffic stop. Jennifer, though a little surprised, quickly gathered her documents from the glove compartment. She handed them over, offering a calm smile. "Is there a problem, officer?" "I didn't think I was speeding," she said, trying to keep the conversation polite. She had been in the public eye for years and knew the importance of handling such situations with grace. The officer took a moment to examine the documents, glancing at them quickly before looking back at Jennifer. "Do you know why I stopped you, ma'am?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. He hadn't noticed her as the mayor of the city. His mind was solely focused on the traffic violation. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm not sure. I was just driving home, officer," she said, still trying to remain composed. It was strange. She had lived in this neighborhood for years, and she had never been pulled over before. She was well aware of her rights and didn't want to escalate the situation unnecessarily. The officer nodded slowly, still scanning her license and registration. "You were speeding through the residential area back there. That's why I stopped you," he said, still not realizing who he was speaking to. To him, this was just another driver to handle. Jennifer's heart sank. She knew she wasn't speeding, but she didn't want to argue with the officer. She had dealt with situations like this before, both personally and professionally, but this time, she wasn't expecting such a confrontation. She felt a little uneasy as she sat in her car, waiting for the officer to give her further instructions. The silence between them grew thicker as the officer kept looking over her paperwork. Little did he know, this encounter was about to take a surprising turn, one that would change everything. As Officer Thompson continued to review Jennifer's documents, she sat there patiently, wondering why he hadn't yet let her go. It was a minor traffic stop after all. She knew the rules well and understood how these situations usually went. Jennifer could sense the tension in the air. Something wasn't quite right. The officer hadn't asked any follow-up questions about the potential speeding violation or offered any explanation about the fine, and that made her uneasy. She sat back in her seat, silently observing the officer's behavior. He didn't seem to recognize her, despite the fact that she was the city's mayor. Her mind raced as she tried to think of any reason for the sudden delay, but she couldn't come up with anything. Why wasn't he letting her go like he would with any other citizen? After what felt like an eternity, the officer finally returned to her window, holding the documents in his hand. He looked at her for a moment, still without any sign of recognition. "I'm going to have to issue you a citation," he said firmly. His tone was cold and distant, and Jennifer felt a sense of disbelief wash over her. She had been pulled over hundreds of times before for minor violations, but she had never been treated this way. Jennifer wasn't one to make a scene, but this was beginning to feel personal. She had worked hard to earn the respect of her community, and the thought that she was being treated differently in this situation troubled her. She had dealt with enough challenges as a woman of color in politics, and the last thing she needed was to be belittled or dismissed by someone in a position of authority. Taking a deep breath, Jennifer decided it was time to clear up the misunderstanding. "Officer, I understand that you're doing your job, but there seems to be a mistake," she said calmly, her voice steady but firm. "I wasn't speeding, and I believe there's some confusion here." She was prepared to explain the situation, to show him that there had been no violation. But instead of listening, the officer's expression hardened, and his eyes narrowed. "Ma'am, I told you already. You were speeding through the residential area," he repeated, his voice sharp now. He took another step toward her, the tension growing. "I've heard enough. You're not above the law, and I won't let anyone get special treatment." Jennifer was taken aback by the officer's response. His words stung, and she realized the situation was escalating in a way that she hadn't expected. She knew she had to keep her composure. After all, she was the mayor of this city, and how she handled moments like this would reflect on her leadership. "I'm not asking for special treatment," she said calmly, trying to de-escalate the situation. "I'm simply asking for you to look at the facts. I'm sure there's been a mistake." The officer was clearly not hearing her. He continued to stand there, with his posture rigid, as though trying to assert dominance. For a moment, Jennifer considered showing him her ID as the mayor, but she stopped herself. She didn't want the situation to turn into a power struggle, and she knew the way she handled this moment could either diffuse the tension or make it worse. Suddenly, the officer's radio crackled, and for a brief moment, his attention shifted. Jennifer took that as an opportunity to stay calm and assertive. "Officer, please, I'm just asking for a fair resolution here. There's no need for this to get out of hand." At this point, she could feel the weight of the situation. It wasn't just about the traffic stop anymore. It was about respect, fairness, and whether the officer would listen to reason or continue to treat her as just another person to control. The uncomfortable silence between them seemed to grow thicker as they stood there, each trying to make sense of the exchange. Just when Jennifer thought the officer was about to speak again, something unexpected happened. A second police car pulled up behind them. The officer turned briefly to look at the car, his demeanor shifting ever so slightly. Jennifer wasn't sure what was going on, but she hoped the new arrival might bring some clarity to the situation. The officer reluctantly stepped back from her window, still holding the citation, as the second officer approached. Jennifer could only hope that this new interaction would bring a resolution. Little did she know, the encounter was about to take an unexpected twist that would change everything. As the second officer approached, Jennifer's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what was going to happen next, but she knew that the situation had already taken a strange turn. The officer who had originally stopped her was still holding her documents in one hand, his expression hard. The new officer, a woman, stepped up to the car, her eyes scanning the situation with a calm, professional demeanor. "Is everything all right here, Brad?" she asked, her voice steady and even. It was clear that she wasn't in a rush to escalate things. She looked at the first officer, waiting for an explanation. Jennifer remained quiet, wondering if this officer would approach things differently. Brad, the officer who had pulled her over, looked a bit frustrated, but he didn't respond immediately. He shifted uncomfortably, as if unsure of how to continue. The new officer glanced at Jennifer, noticing her calm and composed expression, and then back at Brad. "Ma'am, could you step out of the car for a moment?" the second officer asked, addressing Jennifer with a tone that was more respectful than the first officer's. Jennifer felt a twinge of unease, but she nodded, deciding to remain cooperative. She had been in tense situations before, and she knew the importance of handling things with grace. As she stepped out of the car, she tried to maintain a level-headed demeanor, reminding herself that she needed to keep control of the situation, no matter how uncomfortable it became. The new officer led Jennifer to the side of the car, away from the other officer. "I'm Officer Miller," she said. "I want to apologize for the way this was handled. Is there something that you'd like to explain?" Jennifer took a deep breath. "Thank you, officer. I'm the mayor of this city, and I'm trying to understand why I was pulled over in the first place. I know I wasn't speeding, and I don't feel like this situation should have escalated like it has." Officer Miller's eyes widened slightly in realization. "You're the mayor?" she asked. Jennifer nodded, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of surprise on Officer Miller's face. It wasn't that Jennifer wanted to use her position to gain special treatment, but she knew that her identity might change the tone of the situation. "I'm so sorry, Mayor Harris," Officer Miller said, sounding genuinely apologetic. "I didn't realize who you were. Let me talk to Officer Thompson for a moment." Jennifer watched as Officer Miller walked over to Brad, speaking quietly to him. From the looks of it, she was explaining something to him, probably clarifying that this wasn't just an ordinary traffic stop. Jennifer felt her heart rate return to normal as she stood there, wondering how the situation would unfold. She had no intention of causing trouble, but she did expect respect and understanding. A few moments later, Officer Miller turned back to Jennifer. "I've spoken with Officer Thompson, and we've realized that there's been a misunderstanding. It looks like you weren't speeding, and I apologize for the confusion." Jennifer sighed with relief but couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that still lingered in her mind. "I appreciate your apology, Officer Miller, but I have to ask, why was this stop handled in such a manner? It felt like I was being treated unfairly." Officer Miller nodded, clearly understanding Jennifer's concerns. "You're right to ask. There was no reason for this to go the way it did. Officer Thompson got a little too focused on the violation and didn't take the time to assess the situation properly. He should have checked who you were before things escalated." Jennifer could sense that Officer Miller was genuinely trying to make things right, and it helped ease some of the tension she had been feeling. "Thank you, Officer Miller," she said. "I just want to make sure everyone is treated fairly. That's all." With that, Officer Miller assured Jennifer that the citation would be voided and that she wouldn't be facing any charges. Jennifer returned to her car, still a little shaken but grateful that the situation hadn't spiraled further. As she drove away, she couldn't help but reflect on the encounter. The power dynamics, the way she had been treated, and the sudden shift when Officer Miller realized who she was, all of it felt unsettling. Jennifer knew that her role as mayor had brought with it a unique set of challenges, but this experience was a reminder of how important it was to ensure that everyone, no matter their background, received the same level of respect and fairness. She would keep pushing for positive change in her community, and she hoped that one day, situations like this would no longer happen at all. But for now, all she could do was drive home, thankful that this incident had been resolved, but knowing that the conversation about justice and respect had only just begun. As Jennifer drove away from the scene, the flashing lights of the police car slowly faded in her rearview mirror. Her heart had finally stopped racing, but her mind was still replaying everything that had just happened. The unexpected tension, the way Officer Thompson had treated her, and how Officer Miller had stepped in to resolve the situation. It all felt so surreal. Jennifer had faced many challenges throughout her career, but being treated this way by someone who should have been protecting the community was a wake-up call. She knew that moments like these weren't just isolated incidents. They reflected a deeper issue in the way people in positions of power sometimes viewed others. Jennifer had always worked to promote fairness and equality as mayor, and she knew that it was her job to set an example for the community. This incident, though unsettling, only reinforced her determination to make sure everyone, regardless of their background or position, was treated with respect and dignity. When she finally reached her home, Jennifer parked the car and sat there for a moment, gathering her thoughts. She thought about Noah, her son, and how she had always tried to protect him from the injustices that existed in the world. But today, she realized that her work wasn't just about protecting her family. It was about creating a city where fairness and equality were accessible to everyone. It was about ensuring that no one, whether a politician or an ordinary citizen, would ever feel as if they weren't valued. Noah, who had been at home when she arrived, walked into the living room and noticed the concerned expression on his mother's face. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft with worry. Jennifer smiled at him, trying to shake off the weight of the moment. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just a little shaken up, that's all." Noah, ever the curious and empathetic child, sat beside her. "What happened? Did something go wrong?" Jennifer hesitated for a moment. She didn't want to burden him with the details, but she also knew that he needed to understand the importance of what had happened. "I was pulled over by a police officer earlier," she began, her voice steady. "At first, I thought it was just a simple mistake, but the officer treated me like I had done something wrong. He didn't recognize who I was, and he was very quick to assume the worst." Noah frowned, sensing the seriousness of the situation. "Did he treat you badly, Mom?" Jennifer took a deep breath before answering. "Yes, no. He didn't treat me with the respect that I should have received. But another officer arrived and helped fix the situation. It wasn't easy, but it was a reminder that we all have to stand up for what's right." Noah's eyes widened with concern, but Jennifer placed a hand on his shoulder, reassuring him. "It wasn't your fault, and it wasn't my fault either. Sometimes people make mistakes, and we have to be patient. But it also reminds me of the work I still need to do to make sure that everyone, no matter who they are, is treated fairly." Noah nodded thoughtfully. He was beginning to understand, in his own way, the challenges his mother faced as the mayor. He knew that there were many people in the world who weren't treated as they should be, and he admired his mother's commitment to changing that. Jennifer gave him a smile and pulled him into a hug. "You know, Noah, these kinds of things make me want to work harder for a better future. For both of us and for everyone in this city." The evening passed quietly, but Jennifer found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. Despite the stress and uncertainty of the day, she knew that she had learned something valuable. Her belief in fairness and equality had only grown stronger. She understood that the road ahead would not be easy, and that moments like these would continue to challenge her. But she also knew that she had the strength to face whatever came her way. That night, as Jennifer sat at her desk, she made a promise to herself. She would continue to fight for a community where respect, fairness, and understanding were the foundation of every interaction. The situation with Officer Thompson might have been an uncomfortable one, but it was a reminder that her work was far from over. There was still much to be done, and she was ready to face it head-on. Jennifer Harris wasn't just a mayor. She was a symbol of resilience, and the challenges she faced only fueled her determination to make a difference in her city. And no matter what obstacles came her way, she knew she would always be ready to stand up for what was right. The following days after the incident were a time of reflection for Jennifer. She couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to change, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt overlooked or underestimated. As the mayor, Jennifer understood the weight of her position, but she also knew that she had a responsibility to make the city a better place for everyone, not just those in power. The encounter with Officer Thompson had opened her eyes to the deeper issues of bias that existed within the system. It wasn't just about one person making a mistake. It was about the way certain assumptions were made, and how easily those assumptions could lead to unfair treatment. Jennifer couldn't ignore it, and she knew that if she didn't address it, nothing would change. One evening, as she sat in her office at City Hall, Jennifer thought about her next steps. She had spent so much time working on policy and legislation, but now she realized that part of her role as mayor was also to create conversations, to raise awareness about these issues, and to take action where it mattered most. She picked up the phone and dialed her trusted assistant, Michael. "Michael, I need you to set up a meeting with the police department," she said, her voice firm with determination. We need to talk about bias training for all officers, starting with the basics. I want to create a policy that ensures everyone, no matter who they are, gets the respect they deserve." Michael, who had always admired Jennifer's leadership, replied without hesitation, "Of course, Mayor Harris. I'll arrange something as soon as possible." With that, Jennifer felt a sense of relief. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. People didn't always want to change, and challenges like this could take time. But she also knew that it was the right thing to do, and that this was her chance to make a real difference. The next few days were busy. Jennifer met with city officials, local leaders, and even community members to gather input on how best to address these issues. She spoke with experts in law enforcement and diversity, listening carefully to their insights. She wanted to understand not just the problem, but the most effective way to make lasting change. She was determined to create an environment where every citizen, regardless of their background, felt safe and valued. For too long, people in positions of power had taken their privileges for granted. Jennifer knew that this couldn't continue, especially for the people who had been denied the fairness they deserved for far too long. As she walked through the city streets, Jennifer spoke with residents and took note of their concerns. She visited schools and community centers, engaging with young people and asking them how they felt about the future of their city. Everywhere she went, people appreciated her willingness to listen and her commitment to change. The support from the community was overwhelming, and it only strengthened Jennifer's resolve. One afternoon, as she was meeting with a group of local activists, Jennifer was reminded of why she had chosen this path in the first place. She had always wanted to serve others, to help those in need, and to make the world a better place. But now, it wasn't just about policy or law. It was about ensuring that no one ever felt the way she had felt that day on the side of the road. No one should ever be treated unfairly, especially by those meant to protect and serve. As the days turned into weeks, Jennifer's vision for change started to take shape. She worked closely with the police department to develop a comprehensive training program on bias and respect. It wasn't about pointing fingers. It was about creating a culture of understanding, one that valued each person as an individual, no matter their background or position in society. Jennifer's commitment to justice and equality became the driving force behind her leadership. The conversation around bias, fairness, and respect was starting to take center stage, and Jennifer was leading the charge. Though the road ahead would not be without its challenges, Jennifer felt more determined than ever. She had learned a valuable lesson from her experience. The work was never done, but as long as there were people willing to stand up, to speak out, and to fight for what was right, there was always hope. And Jennifer, the mayor, was ready to keep fighting. As Jennifer continued to work on the changes she had set into motion, the momentum began to build. The support from the community was growing, and the conversations about bias training and fairness were becoming more widespread. Jennifer could see that the city was starting to pay attention, and that was a powerful feeling. She knew that creating change would take time, but she was prepared for the long haul. One morning, Jennifer sat in her office, reviewing the plans for the upcoming community meeting. This was going to be an important event. It was her chance to speak directly to the people about the steps they were taking to address the issues she had witnessed firsthand. She had always prided herself on transparency and open communication, and this meeting was an opportunity for her to listen as much as it was to speak. She had invited community leaders, police officers, and residents to come together and share their thoughts on how the city could move forward. Jennifer believed that the best solutions came from collaboration, and she wanted to ensure that everyone had a voice in the process. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she felt confident that this was the right path. The day of the meeting arrived, and Jennifer stood in front of a packed room. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation, but also a sense of hope. People were ready for change, ready to work together to make their city a better place. As she stepped up to the podium, Jennifer took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility she carried. This wasn't just about policies or programs. It was about real lives, real people, and real change. "Thank you all for being here today," Jennifer began, her voice steady. "We're at a crossroads in our city, and the decisions we make today will shape our future. We've all seen the ways that injustice and inequality can take root, and we know that the time for change is now. But change isn't something that can happen overnight. It requires us to work together, to listen to one another, and to act with compassion and understanding." She paused for a moment, looking around the room at the diverse group of faces before her. "I know that many of you have felt the weight of bias and unfair treatment. I have too, but I am committed to making sure that this city works for all of us. No one should ever feel unsafe or unheard. We are all in this together, and together we can make a difference." Jennifer's words resonated with the crowd. She could see the nods of agreement, the faces filled with hope. This was exactly what they needed, someone who understood the challenges they faced and was willing to fight for them. After her speech, the floor was open for questions. The room buzzed with conversation as people shared their experiences and their ideas for how to improve the city. There were concerns about the police force, about the ways that certain groups had been unfairly treated, and about the gaps in communication between the community and local leaders. Jennifer listened intently, taking notes and asking follow-up questions to dig deeper into the issues. She didn't offer quick fixes or empty promises. Instead, she acknowledged the difficulties they faced and vowed to continue working toward meaningful solutions. As the meeting came to a close, Jennifer felt a sense of pride. This was a start, a beginning of something bigger. The conversations that had taken place were just the first step toward real change. People were speaking up, sharing their stories, and being heard. For the first time in a long time, Jennifer felt that the city was truly coming together. That evening, as Jennifer returned home, she felt a sense of accomplishment. It hadn't been an easy day, but it had been a productive one. She knew that the journey was far from over, but she was more determined than ever to keep pushing forward. She had seen firsthand the power of unity and open dialogue, and she knew that this was the way forward. Her phone buzzed with a message from Michael, her assistant. He had received positive feedback about the meeting from several community leaders. The message was simple but powerful. Change is happening. People are listening. Jennifer smiled as she read it. Change was happening, and it was happening because people like her, people who were willing to stand up and fight for what was right, were taking action. She couldn't wait to see where this journey would take them next. The following weeks were a whirlwind for Jennifer, as the momentum she had started began to take shape. The community meeting had been a success, and she could feel the positive energy from those who had attended. People were beginning to see the changes that were in motion, and there was a renewed sense of hope in the city. Jennifer knew that this was just the beginning, but it was a crucial step forward. The police department, under Jennifer's leadership, began to make significant changes. Officer Thompson, who had originally stopped Jennifer during the traffic incident, had undergone bias training, and his actions during the stop were being reviewed as part of the department's new initiative. Jennifer made sure that the training wasn't just a formality. It was a real opportunity for growth and understanding. She believed that every officer needed to understand the importance of treating people with respect, no matter their background. One afternoon, Jennifer sat down with the chief of police to discuss the progress they had made. They had worked together to create a comprehensive plan for ongoing bias education, and Jennifer was eager to see how it would be implemented across the department. "We've made a lot of progress in a short amount of time," the chief said, his tone reflecting a sense of optimism. "But I know there's more to be done. We've got to make sure the officers are committed to these changes every day, not just in training sessions." Jennifer nodded in agreement. "That's why I've asked for regular follow-ups and feedback from the community. We can't just talk about change. We have to show it, and we have to make sure that everyone feels like they're being treated fairly." The chief smiled. "I appreciate your leadership, Jennifer. You're setting the standard for what this city should be about." Jennifer felt a sense of pride, but she knew the journey wasn't over. There were still pockets of resistance, and not everyone was on board with the changes she was pushing for. Some people were set in their ways, unwilling to acknowledge the need for a shift in how things had been done. But Jennifer had learned early on that real change didn't come easily. It took time, effort, and unwavering determination. Over the next few months, Jennifer continued to engage with the community. She attended local events, visited schools, and held open forums where residents could share their thoughts on how the city was evolving. The feedback she received was overwhelmingly positive, but there were also areas where improvement was needed. Jennifer listened carefully to everyone, knowing that her job was to represent the people, all of them, not just those who agreed with her. At one of the community forums, a young woman stood up and shared her story. She had been stopped by the police multiple times, treated unfairly, and felt invisible in her own neighborhood. Jennifer listened intently, her heart aching for the woman's experience. After she finished speaking, Jennifer stood up and addressed the crowd. "I want to thank you for sharing your story," Jennifer began. "It takes a lot of courage to speak out, and I promise you, we are working to ensure that no one else has to feel the way you did. Change is happening, but it's going to take all of us to make it last, and together, we can do that." The room erupted in applause, and Jennifer felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that these moments were the ones that truly mattered. This was why she had become mayor in the first place, to make sure people felt heard, respected, and valued. Later that evening, Jennifer reflected on everything that had happened so far. She had faced challenges, but she had never lost sight of her goal. The road to equality and fairness was long, but she was willing to walk it, step by step, with the people of her city by her side. As she sat at her desk, reviewing the next steps for the ongoing reforms, Jennifer received a message from Michael. "People are talking about how the city is changing, Jennifer. You're making a real difference." Jennifer smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. She still had much work to do, but she was proud of how far they had come. The journey wasn't over, but the future was looking brighter, and Jennifer was determined to keep pushing for the kind of city where everyone could feel truly at home. As the months passed, Jennifer's dedication to bringing about meaningful change in the city continued to shape the future of the community. The progress was noticeable, but Jennifer knew that sustaining change was just as important as starting it. The police department had made strides in their bias training, and many officers were beginning to engage with the community in a more thoughtful and respectful way. However, Jennifer was aware that there were still many challenges ahead. Change wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a constant effort, and there would always be setbacks. But as she walked through the city's streets, she could feel a shift. The people she passed on the sidewalk greeted her with smiles and nods, and conversations around town had taken on a more hopeful tone. People were talking about the changes happening, about how the community was beginning to feel more connected. Jennifer was more committed than ever to keeping the momentum going. One afternoon, Jennifer sat down with her team to review the results of the latest community outreach programs. She was pleased to see the positive feedback, but she also noticed areas where improvement was still needed. While many residents felt that progress had been made, some expressed concerns that there was still work to do to fully bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community. Jennifer understood this concern. It wasn't enough to just have good intentions. Action had to follow through. "We've made great strides," Jennifer said as she looked around the room, "but we need to keep pushing forward. I want to make sure the changes we started are lasting. We have to keep listening to our residents and make sure their voices are heard in every step of this process." Her team nodded in agreement. They were all invested in seeing the city thrive, and they knew Jennifer's leadership was key to making that happen. The challenge now was to keep everyone engaged, to ensure that the people who had felt overlooked or ignored for so long would continue to feel empowered. Later that day, Jennifer attended a meeting with community leaders to discuss the next phase of their initiatives. The atmosphere was filled with optimism as everyone gathered to brainstorm ideas for creating even more opportunities for collaboration between the police, city officials, and the people. Jennifer's approach had always been to include everyone in the process, to hear their concerns and incorporate their ideas into the solutions. She believed that when people felt included, they were more likely to be invested in the outcomes. As the meeting concluded, one of the leaders stood up and said, "Jennifer, you've done something extraordinary. The change you've brought is more than just policies. It's a shift in the way we see each other. We've started something that can't be undone." Jennifer smiled, feeling the weight of his words. She had worked tirelessly to make sure that everyone felt seen, heard, and valued. But the work was far from over. She knew that the path ahead was long, and there would be many more obstacles to overcome. Yet, for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful for the future. When she returned home that evening, Noah greeted her with a big hug. She could see the pride in his eyes, and it warmed her heart. "How was your day, Mom?" he asked, his voice full of curiosity. "It was a good day, sweetie," Jennifer replied, smiling. "We're making progress, but there's still work to be done." Noah nodded. He had always admired his mom for her strength and determination. He knew that she wasn't just fighting for her own success. She was fighting for the success of everyone in the city, for fairness and equality. That night, as Jennifer sat in the quiet of her home, she reflected on everything that had happened. She thought about the challenges she had faced, the obstacles that had seemed impossible to overcome, and the way the city had responded. It wasn't perfect, but they had come a long way. The city was changing, and Jennifer knew that she was part of that change. She was determined to continue pushing for a future where every person, no matter their background, would feel respected and heard. It wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to keep moving forward, one step at a time. For Jennifer, the fight for justice wasn't just a duty, it was a calling. And as long as she had the strength to keep going, she would continue to lead the way toward a better future for everyone.